One of the most powerful forces in human psychology is the effect of absence. When someone is constantly present, constantly available, and constantly communicating, their presence can gradually become ordinary. The mind adapts to what it receives repeatedly. What once demanded attention eventually becomes part of the background. This is why making people think about you is not always about giving them more of yourself. Sometimes it is about understanding when to step back and allow your absence to create awareness. Most people make the opposite mistake. They believe that if they want someone to remember them, they must stay in constant contact. They send another message when the conversation ends. They check in when there is nothing important to say. They respond immediately to every message. They make themselves available whenever the other person wants attention. They believe that more presence will create a stronger connection. But excessive presence can have the opposite psychological effect. When someone knows they can access you whenever they want, there is less reason for their mind to wonder about you. There is no unanswered question. There is no space to notice your absence. There is simply constant access, and constant access creates familiarity. Familiarity can create comfort, but it can also reduce curiosity. Think about what happens when a person suddenly stops doing something you have become accustomed to. You notice it. You may not have consciously appreciated the behavior while it was happening, but once it disappears, your mind registers the change. You begin wondering why it stopped. You remember the pattern that existed before. The absence forces your attention towards something that had previously become ordinary. The same principle can operate in relationships. If you have always been the person who initiates the conversation, try to understand what happens when you stop initiating, not as a game, but because you have decided to redirect your attention toward your own life. If you have always been immediately available, allow yourself to become less accessible when your priorities require it. If you constantly explain what you are doing, stop feeling the need to report every detail. You create space, and space gives the other person's mind something to work with. They may begin wondering what you are doing. They may remember a previous conversation. They may notice that your attention is no longer automatically available. They may become curious about where your focus has gone. But there is a crucial distinction between scarcity and manipulation. If you disappear only to make someone anxious, you are still psychologically dependent on them. Your body may be absent, but your mind is still waiting for their reaction. You check whether they contacted you. You wonder whether they noticed. You become frustrated if they do not respond. That is not power. Real scarcity comes from having a life that does not revolve around being noticed. You become less available because you have meaningful priorities. You have work to complete, skills to develop, goals to pursue, relationships to nurture, a mind to strengthen, a future to build. Your attention is not constantly waiting for someone else to tell you where it should go. This creates a very different impression. People can sense when someone is pretending to be unavailable and when someone genuinely has a life of their own. The first feels like a tactic. The second feels like independence, and independence is memorable. When you are no longer constantly trying to maintain someone's attention, your interactions become more meaningful. You speak when you have something worth saying. You listen more carefully. You stop filling every silence because you are uncomfortable with it. You allow conversations to end naturally instead of forcing them to continue. Then when you do appear, your presence has greater psychological weight. Your absence is not designed to punish anyone. It simply creates contrast. People experience your presence, then experience your absence, and the difference becomes noticeable. That contrast can make your presence easier to remember. The deeper lesson is that you cannot force someone to think about you. You can only control the quality of the impression you leave and the amount of access you give to your attention. Stop trying to occupy someone's mind every moment. Build a life that makes your own mind worth occupying. When your presence is meaningful and your absence is natural, people have a reason to remember you. There is a difference between being remembered and being constantly present in someone's life. Many people confuse the two. They believe that if they keep talking, keep messaging, keep checking in, and keep reminding someone of their existence, they will become unforgettable. But the human mind does not remember everything simply because it is repeated. In fact, repetition without emotional significance often becomes invisible. What stays in the mind is what creates a feeling, interrupts an expectation, or leaves behind something unresolved. This is why the quality of an interaction matters far more than the quantity. Think about the people you remember years later. You probably do not remember every ordinary conversation you had with them. You remember a particular moment, something they said when you needed it, a conversation that made you see yourself differently, a surprising act of confidence, a moment when they understood something about you that others had missed. These experiences remain because they created an emotional impression. Emotion gives memory weight when you interact with someone. Your goal should not be to make the interaction longer, it should be to make it meaningful. Listen carefully instead of waiting for your opportunity to speak. Ask questions that reveal something deeper. Share an idea that gives the other person a different perspective. Make them feel understood without desperately trying to impress them. When an interaction carries emotional significance, the mind naturally returns to it. This is where many people make a mistake. They think attraction and memorability come from talking about themselves constantly. They tell endless stories, explain every opinion, reveal every detail, and try to prove how interesting they are. But the person who constantly tries to demonstrate their value often creates the opposite impression. A stronger approach is to create an experience. When someone speaks with you, let them feel that your attention is genuine. Give them the sense that you are actually present rather than simply waiting for the conversation to benefit you. A person may forget your exact words, but they will remember the emotional atmosphere surrounding those words. Did they feel calm around you? Did they feel understood? Did they feel challenged in an interesting way? Did they discover something new? Did they leave the conversation thinking about an idea they had never considered before? These are the impressions that remain. There is also power in contrast. If every interaction is intense, emotional, and endless, nothing stands out. But when you know how to create moments of genuine connection and then allow the interaction to end naturally, the mind has space to process what happened. This is why you should not be afraid of ending a good conversation. Many people ruin memorable moments because they refuse to leave them at the right time. They continue talking after the energy has disappeared. They keep sending messages because they are afraid the connection will weaken. They add unnecessary words because silence makes them uncomfortable. But sometimes the strongest impression is created when you leave while the interaction still has energy. You allow the other person to experience the difference between your presence and your absence. They may later remember the conversation, replay something you said, or wonder about what you meant. You did not force them to think about you. You simply gave their mind something worth returning to. This principle becomes even stronger when your interactions are authentic. Do not manufacture mystery. Do not pretend to understand someone when you do not. Do not use calculated emotional tricks simply to make yourself memorable. People eventually recognize manipulation, and once they do, the impression you created becomes negative. Instead, become someone who naturally leaves depth behind, develop knowledge, develop perspective, learn to communicate with precision, become curious about people, pay attention to details others ignore, have experiences that give you something meaningful to share. When your inner world becomes richer, your conversations naturally become more memorable. And remember, being memorable does not mean occupying someone's thoughts every hour. That is not realistic, and it is not the goal. The goal is to create an emotional association strong enough that certain moments, places, ideas, or feelings naturally remind them of you. A song can remind someone of a person, a particular phrase can bring back a conversation, a place can revive a memory, an idea can suddenly make someone think of the person who introduced it to them. That is the deeper psychology of influence. You do not need to constantly remind people that you exist when you have already given them something meaningful to remember. Make your presence meaningful and let the memory continue working when your presence is gone. There is a reason mystery has such a powerful effect on the human mind. People are naturally drawn toward what they do not completely understand. When someone reveals everything about themselves immediately, there is very little left for curiosity to explore. The other person already knows what you think, what you feel, what you are doing, what you want, and how you are likely to respond. The mind receives the information and moves on. But when there are still unanswered questions, attention has somewhere to go. This is why revealing yourself gradually can make you more memorable. Many people make the mistake of trying to create closeness too quickly. They tell someone everything about their past, explain every emotion, reveal every ambition, and constantly update them about their life. They believe that complete openness will make the other person feel connected, but connection does not require immediate exposure. In fact, when every layer is revealed at once, you remove the process of discovery that often makes human relationships interesting. Think about the difference between reading a book one page at a time and being given the entire story in a single sentence. The first creates anticipation. The second removes it. The human mind enjoys completing incomplete patterns. When something remains partially unknown, curiosity continues working in the background. You may have experienced this yourself. Someone says something unexpectedly insightful during a conversation, but does not explain everything behind it. Later, you find yourself thinking about what they meant. Someone mentions an interesting experience, but does not tell the entire story. You become curious. Someone has a quality you cannot immediately define, and you begin observing them more closely. The mystery creates mental movement. But mystery should never become deception. You do not need to lie, manipulate, or deliberately confuse people. You simply do not need to reveal everything immediately. Privacy is not dishonesty. Silence is not weakness. Having parts of your life that belong only to you is not secrecy designed to manipulate others. It is an indication that you possess an inner world that does not require constant external approval. This becomes especially powerful when you stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. If someone asks why you made a particular decision, you do not always need to provide a long defense. If you have chosen a goal, you do not need to announce every step. If you are working on something important, you do not need to constantly tell everyone about it. Let some results appear before the explanations. People become more curious about what they cannot completely predict. This does not mean becoming emotionally unavailable. Genuine relationships require honesty. If someone deserves to know something important, communicate it clearly. The principle is not to hide what matters. The principle is to stop giving every person immediate access to every part of you. Let people discover you. Allow your personality to unfold through different situations. Let your values become visible through your actions rather than through endless declarations. Let your confidence appear in how you behave rather than in how often you tell people that you are confident. This creates depth, and depth is one of the strongest ingredients of memorability. Someone who reveals everything immediately can become familiar very quickly, but someone whose personality contains layers gives the mind more material to explore. One conversation may reveal their intelligence, another may reveal their humor, another may reveal their discipline, another may reveal a completely unexpected side of their character. Now the person cannot reduce you to a single impression. They begin wondering what else exists beneath the surface. This is also why you should resist the temptation to respond to every question about your personal life. You are allowed to say less. You are allowed to keep certain ambitions private until they become real. You are allowed to have thoughts that you do not immediately publish. You are allowed to leave some conversations unfinished. The important thing is that your mystery comes from substance, not performance. Build a life that naturally contains things people cannot understand in one conversation. Develop interests, experiences, knowledge, discipline, and perspectives that make you more complex than the image you present at first. Then you will not need to manufacture mystery. People will think about you because they have not completely figured you out, and the human mind has a natural desire to return to what remains unfinished. There is a powerful psychological difference between giving someone constant attention and giving them attention that actually means something. When you are always available, always initiating, and always trying to keep an interaction alive, your attention eventually loses its distinction. The other person becomes accustomed to it. But when your attention is focused, intentional, and followed by natural space, the experience can remain in their mind long after the interaction has ended. This is why strategic attention can make you more memorable. Imagine speaking with someone who constantly checks their phone, responds to everyone around them, and only gives you half of their attention. Even if they spend hours with you, the interaction may leave very little behind. Now imagine someone who, when they are with you, becomes completely present. They listen carefully, they notice details, they respond thoughtfully. For those few moments, you feel that their attention is entirely directed toward you. That kind of attention has weight. The human mind notices contrast. When someone gives you genuine attention in a world where most people are distracted, the experience feels different. You may remember the person not because they spoke for hours, but because of how completely present they were when they did speak. This is why you should stop confusing quantity with impact. You do not need to constantly message someone to make them think about you. You do not need to fill every silence. You do not need to extend every conversation until there is nothing left to say. Sometimes a short interaction with emotional depth creates a stronger memory than hours of meaningless communication. Give your attention fully when you choose to give it, then return to your life. This creates a psychological contrast between presence and absence. The person experiences the intensity of your attention, and then the interaction ends. You do not immediately send another message asking whether they enjoyed the conversation. You do not manufacture another reason to contact them. You allow the experience to exist on its own. This is where many people become impatient. They think that if they stop communicating, the connection will disappear. So they keep sending messages, asking questions, sharing random information, and creating artificial reasons to remain present. But by doing this, they leave no room for the other person's mind to process the experience. You must understand the power of psychological space. After a meaningful interaction, people often continue thinking about what happened. They remember a particular sentence, they replay a moment. They consider something you said from another perspective. They wonder what you meant. They may even imagine what another conversation with you would be like. You do not need to interrupt that process. Let the memory breathe. This does not mean deliberately withholding attention to create anxiety. That becomes manipulation, and manipulation eventually destroys trust. The stronger principle is to give attention sincerely and then allow the other person freedom to decide whether they want more. If they reach out, respond because you genuinely want to. If they do not, continue your own life. This is where emotional independence becomes important. Your goal is not to monitor whether your strategy worked. If you spend the next 6 hours checking your phone wondering whether they are thinking about you, then you have not created freedom. You have simply transferred your attention from communication to obsession. Real power is being able to give attention without becoming dependent on the response. There is also a lesson in timing. Not every moment needs to be extended. Sometimes leaving a conversation while the energy is still positive creates a stronger memory than staying until both people become tired. When you know when to end an interaction, you preserve its emotional quality. Think of it as leaving a door slightly open. Rather than forcing someone through it, the person has experienced something meaningful, but there is still room for another experience later. That gap can create anticipation without requiring manipulation. Your attention should therefore feel intentional, not desperate. Be fully present when you are present. Be fully engaged when you engage. But when the interaction is complete, have enough confidence to step back. Do not immediately demand another moment simply because you enjoyed the first one. People remember those who make them feel genuinely seen, but they also remember the contrast created when that attention is no longer immediately available. Give people an experience worth remembering, then give their mind enough space to remember it. There is a deeper reason why some people remain in your mind while others disappear almost immediately. Emotional independence creates a different kind of presence. When someone is desperately trying to make you think about them, you can often feel the effort behind their behavior. They constantly seek your attention, monitor your reactions, and look for reassurance that they still matter. Their presence becomes predictable because everything they do is connected to the question of whether you are noticing them. But when someone is genuinely independent, their behavior carries a different quality. They are present because they choose to be present, not because they need to be noticed. This distinction is critical if you want to understand the psychology of making people think about you. You cannot create a lasting impression by constantly demanding attention. In fact, the more desperately you try to remain in someone's thoughts, the more obvious your dependence becomes. You may send another message because you are afraid the conversation is fading. You may create excuses to meet because you are afraid they will forget you. You may post things hoping they will see them. You may carefully analyze whether they reacted. But beneath all of these behaviors is the same problem. Your attention is still controlled by their attention. That destroys the very independence that makes someone memorable. A person with emotional independence does something completely different. They give attention when they genuinely want to give it, but they do not require a specific response. They can enjoy a conversation without immediately needing another one. They can show interest without becoming attached to the outcome. They can walk away from an interaction and continue with their day without wondering every few minutes whether the other person is thinking about them. That calmness creates psychological space, and psychological space is important because people think more about what they are free to wonder about. If you are constantly telling someone what you feel, what you are doing, and what you want from them, there is little room for their imagination. But when you continue living your own life, they begin to see that you have an identity beyond the relationship. You become less predictable. They may wonder what you are focused on. They may become curious about what occupies your time. They may notice that you are not constantly looking for their approval. They may begin to understand that your attention is something you choose to give rather than something you desperately need to receive. But there is an important warning here. Do not fake independence. Pretending to be busy while secretly waiting for someone's message is not independence. Ignoring someone while constantly checking whether they have noticed is not independence. Delaying a response simply to make someone anxious is not independence. That is still dependence, only disguised as strategy. Real independence means your life genuinely continues whether that person thinks about you or not. Build routines that matter to you. Work toward goals that require concentration. Develop skills that make you stronger. Spend time with people who enrich your life. Read, learn, create, exercise, travel, work, and pursue experiences that expand your identity. The more complete your life becomes, the less desperate you become for one person's attention. And paradoxically, that is when people often begin thinking about you more. They notice that you are not constantly trying to be noticed. They notice that your confidence does not depend on their approval. They notice that you can enjoy their presence without becoming dependent on it. They notice that when you leave, you actually leave. Your absence is no longer a tactic. It is simply the natural result of having somewhere else to be. This creates a powerful psychological contrast. Someone may spend time with you and feel genuinely connected, but afterward they do not receive endless reminders of you. Instead, they return to their own life and are left with the memory of the interaction. Because you are not constantly reinforcing your presence, their mind has an opportunity to revisit it on its own. This is how emotional independence strengthens memorability. You are not forcing yourself into their thoughts. You are giving them enough freedom to place you there themselves, and that is far more powerful. The ultimate goal is not to become obsessed with whether people think about you. It is to become so secure in yourself that you no longer need to control their thoughts. Build a life that does not chase attention, and your presence will become memorable precisely because you are not begging to be remembered. The deepest way to remain in someone's mind is not to constantly remind them that you exist. It is to become associated with a feeling they do not easily experience with everyone else. People may forget your exact words, the clothes you wore, or the details of an ordinary conversation, but they remember the emotional state they experienced in your presence. This is why the strongest form of memorability is not endless communication, it is emotional association. Think about the people who remain in your memory long after they have disappeared from your daily life. Perhaps one made you feel understood when nobody else seemed to understand you. Another challenged the way you thought. Someone else made you feel unusually calm, confident, inspired, or alive. The memory survives because the person became connected to an emotion. This is the psychology you should understand. If you want people to think about you, stop trying so hard to make them think about you. Instead, become someone whose presence creates a distinct experience. Be calm when everyone else is desperate for attention. Be genuinely curious when everyone else is trying to impress. Speak with confidence without constantly proving yourself. Listen deeply enough that people feel that their words actually matter. When someone feels something unusual in your presence, their mind stores the experience differently. But this requires substance. You cannot manufacture a powerful emotional association through empty tricks. You cannot pretend to be mysterious forever. You cannot constantly disappear and expect people to remain fascinated. Eventually, people recognize patterns. If there is no depth beneath the behavior, the mystery collapses. Your personality must contain something worth remembering. Develop ideas that make people think. Develop stories that carry meaning. Develop confidence that does not require applause. Develop humor that feels natural. Develop discipline that people can see through your actions. Develop the ability to remain calm when others become emotional. Develop a perspective that makes ordinary situations appear differently. Then your presence begins to leave a psychological mark. Imagine having a conversation with someone and saying something that changes the way they see a problem. Hours later, they encounter that problem again, and your words return to their mind. You are no longer physically present, but the idea you introduce continues working. That is a deeper form of influence. Or perhaps you make someone feel genuinely understood. Later, they meet another person who listens without judgment, and they remember the difference, or perhaps your calmness stands out during a chaotic situation. Later, when they experience pressure again, they remember how you handled yourself. You become connected to a specific emotional quality. This is why you should pay attention to how people feel around you, not simply to what they hear from you. Words disappear quickly when they are not connected to emotion, but an emotional experience can remain for years. There is also power in leaving at the right moment. Do not exhaust every interaction. Do not reveal everything. Do not continue talking simply because you are afraid of being forgotten. Sometimes the strongest impression is created when the interaction ends while the energy is still alive. The other person leaves with something unfinished, not because you deliberately manipulated them, but because there is still more of you they have not discovered. This creates anticipation, and anticipation naturally brings the mind back. But remember, the goal is never to control another person's thoughts. You cannot force someone to think about you, and trying to do so can turn attraction into obsession or manipulation. The real goal is to become memorable through the quality of your character and the emotional experience you create. When you are confident without arrogance, mysterious without deception, attentive without desperation, and independent without becoming cold, people begin to associate your presence with something distinctive. Then ordinary moments can bring you back into their thoughts. A particular place, a certain idea, a phrase you once used, a feeling they experienced around you, a situation that reminds them of your presence. You are no longer trying to enter their mind. Their own mind is making the connection, and that is the most powerful form of memorability because it happens without your permission or effort. Become someone whose presence leaves an emotional imprint. Then have enough confidence to step away and let the memory do its work. When people associate you with a feeling they cannot easily replace, they will think of you even when you are no longer